All right. My name is Jared Budlong. I'm running as an independent candidate for governor in Alabama. If you haven't seen me before, this is your first interaction. Hi. I believe in human rights for every resident of Alabama. And today I'm sitting down with Sadie Carpenter, who reached out to me and said, I kind of like the things that you're putting out on social media and wanted to learn more. And my preference is to have as open of a campaign as possible. So if somebody is willing, I'm going to have those conversations publicly, and that way, there's no behind the doors conversations with me, unless somebody prefers to keep that stuff private. So Sadie graciously was willing to have us do this live. So
That was a little bit
Sadie,
scary for me because, I
yeah,
want to talk to you about stuff that's very personal and a little bit hard to talk about, but I feel like that's such a valuable concept to do these things openly, and I thought, hey, what the heck, let's give it a try.
yeah. So I really do. I thoroughly appreciate it. It's weird for most people where you're like, hey, I know you want to talk to me as a potential candidate, but can we do that live? Can we I'm just going to put on every possible platform. So if that's cool, and a lot of people have said no, and that's fine, because this isn't normal. I get it, but I'm not trying to run a normal campaign either, because normal has not been good to the majority of our state.
Mm-hmm.
It's been serving some people, but it has not been serving the majority of our state well. So, um, if you're watching on TikTok, I'm going to look down at that other camera. I will not be paying a whole lot of attention. It looks like one of my moderators is here, so hopefully you guys can hear Sadie. If you can't, tell me to turn the volume up. I will crank it up a bit. If you want to interact with us, you can go to Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. I can't interact with, but the other three we can at least see the comments as they come in. So say that. Hang out on TikTok if that's your preferred platform, but I won't be able to pay attention much. So yeah. So Sadie, what first? Because sure, I'm running as a candidate. That's fine, but like I'm here to help represent the people. So give people a little bit of background on who you are, as much as you're comfortable giving, and hopefully we can ignore my kids banging on the door in the background.
That's okay. I'm sitting here, so this is my baby monitor because my 1-year-old is taking a nap right now. So
Yeah.
power to the parents. Parents doing big stuff. So my family, I grew up all over the United States because my dad was a pastor. So I lived in Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, and Alabama. I spent the least time there, but Alabama always felt like home because it was where my grandparents lived. Alabama is where all of my grandparents, all of my great grandparents, and many of my great great grandparents, and even further up, are buried. My family has just deep, deep roots in the state of Alabama, going all the way back to like the 1840s and even further back. So that was always home. And no matter where we lived all around the country, I grew up in several different states, but like 14 different houses. Alabama was the one place that was always stable and where I could go see my grandparents, and it was my favorite place. And it was my favorite place I ever lived. So my my father loved the state of Alabama very deeply. He had a podcast that was all about the Gulf Coast of Alabama that supported tourism and was meant to encourage local spending. I think Alabama has just always felt like home. It's always been my favorite place. And I always hoped, I moved up to here. I live in Portland, Oregon. I moved up here about, goodness, what has it been? Coming up on 6 years now. And I always hoped that I would be moving home to Alabama one day. And recently that's become a little bit more of a difficult thing to think about. So I wanted to jump on a call with somebody who is running for governor, who might be able to make the state that I don't live in, but the state that I love so much, a better place.
Yeah. So, I mean, that we talked a little bit before we went on air, but my history for anybody who's tuning in that isn't aware of that, like I'm a cishet white man from Daphne who got fed up with the more things that I learned that it seemed like no one wanted to speak up for. um, and no one was doing it. There are individuals doing it. I don't want to discredit any individual people who are speaking up and showing up and yelling about it. But no one seems to be running who's willing to openly say things like, hey, maybe we should end modern day slavery in our prison system. Like, no, everybody knows it's there. Well, can't say everybody because I didn't until, last couple of years. But the people in politics, they have to they have to know that exists. Like they just you can't not know that getting into this. Like if you don't, then I would be surprised. I'll say that. But nobody seems to want to say those harder truths out loud. And my understanding is that it has a lot to do with which party you're running under. So either you support the system entirely, and that's common in our state, or maybe you don't support it, but you can't say some of the harder things out loud because where your money comes from controls kind of what you're saying. And people try to downplay that. I've talked to some people on the Democratic side, not people running for major offices, but people who support the Democratic Party, and they kind of asked, "Hey, why didn't you run as a Democrat?" And like, it's twofold. I started running too late. I missed the cutoff period, so to speak. And second, I wouldn't want to because I don't see those people who are already in that party saying these things, even though they say they believe them. Like their websites say the right things, but when you see any kind of content from them, they don't say anything like that. And I got tired of not seeing people being stood up for. So not trying to be the the white savior type situation. Like that's not what I'm aiming for. But nobody else is speaking up, and I have no problem saying that stuff out loud. And I'm not tied to a party, so I can say that stuff and not have to worry about it. I can piss off individuals like people on TikTok chat right now. They can be confused and mad, and that's fine. But I'm not worried about them. I'm worried about the people with a uterus who are afraid to move back to Alabama, like you're talking about,
Mm-hmm.
because of ectopic pregnancies, and those being potentially being illegal. They're not currently, but we have laws on the books that are ready to become a possibility as soon as the federal regulations are removed.
So I
And
will tell you, um, I clicked onto your platform. Being I was interested in what you had to say. I clicked on to read through your platform before we set up this chat, and
yeah,
I did not click on thinking, "Oh, I hope this guy agrees with me on every single political thing that I think." But then I saw you call the prison system modern day slavery, and I was like, "Oh, this guy might agree with me on more things than I thought." But I moved to Portland, and I miss Alabama. And for people who don't know who I am, my father passed away just about 3 months ago, and it was completely unexpected, completely out of the blue. He was 62 years old. Um, there's nothing that I want more in the world than to move home and be with my mom. There's nothing I want more than to bring my beautiful baby home to Alabama so that she can be a comfort to my mom during this, and so that I can sit on my dad's grave and have picnics and talk to him, so that I can visit the graves of literal generations of ancestors that are buried there, so that I can visit the restaurants that my dad recommended on his podcast, so that I can be where it feels like home. And I was saying before we started this live that I used to feel like an expat up here in Portland, and now I'm starting to feel a little bit more like an exile, and it's concerning to me. I have a 1-year-old daughter, and I'm a person I would love to have more babies plural. I'd love 3 or 4 of them. But it scares me to think about moving home to Alabama because I'm worried. What if I had a miscarriage, which is a thing that happens? It's unfortunate, but what if I had that and got arrested like somebody did in Texas just a couple weeks ago? What if I had an ectopic pregnancy, which happens in about 1 or 2% of all pregnancies, and couldn't access medical treatment? What if I got seriously sick or died from that? That seems just a little bit past my personal risk that I'm willing to take.
Yeah.
So now I'm put in this position where I would love to move home, but it seems a little too risky.
That is completely understandable, and I will steer the direction slightly in kind of an opposite manner, where there people have one of the common responses I get when I said, "Hey, I'm fed up with it, and so I'm gonna run for governor." Like the either people either say, it's usually three things. It's you're crazy. You should have run for something smaller, like city council or something else, or you should move. And like those are the three options people give, and it's like the first one I might give you. Like time will tell. Like it is a harebrained idea. I'm going for it because nobody else wants to say it, and I have the ability to speak up and hopefully resonate slash reason with people who would normally be oppressing the people who are currently affected by these laws. So, or the laws that are pending.
I hate that "you should move" so
Yes,
much.
yeah. So my general response to that has turned into, okay, if you bought a house and you had it inspected, you moved, you bought it, you moved in, and 3 months later, like you find out that there's a a big crack in the foundation and it broke one of your water pipes that's going through the concrete foundation, whatever. Your immediate response, the people that I know and talk to would not go, nope, well, cracking the foundation, peace out. Like I, they might try to sell it. Like I'll give you that, but in order to sell it, you have to fix it before somebody else is going to buy it. So like you can't just leave your problems. That's not how things get fixed. Like that's not a viable solution. And even if it was, not everybody can move. Like they're one of the bigger problems in not just our state, but in the South of the United States, there is a huge poverty problem. Like you
Mhm,
can't just get up and leave. Like I think people would have. Like honestly, like
mhm,
I would think people would leave if they could. Because like why would you put up with this? Like it just doesn't. I don't know why you would want to. If you had a choice and you were someone who is being directly impacted by all of these laws. I am not one of those people. Like that I am trying to learn more about how our state has been impacting marginalized communities and try to my best to stand up for those people as someone who hasn't been marginalized, generally speaking. Like I'm sure some things, uh, I'm sure I've been negatively impacted in some way by our state, but uh, not in the ways that we're talking about. So, my race,
see
my gender
mhm.
identity, the fact that I don't have a uterus, like all of that, I'm not directly impacted with. So,
See,
we're going to say the quiet, or not the quiet. We're going to say the.
my perspective is
Go ahead.
that my family is the kind of person the kind of people that you would want living in your state if you were the governor. If you were the governor of any state and you somehow had magical privileges to decide who could and couldn't move into your state. If you looked at my family, my husband has a good job. I work part-time. Um, we vote. We're good citizens and we keep our if we live in an apartment, but my husband says that he loves yard work and would love to keep a yard, very Hank Hill-esque way. We want to be on the PTA, we want to pay income taxes and kind of be white picket fence people. And I don't think that the just move ideology is helpful, because people like us have the privilege to just move. A lot of people don't have the privilege to just do that. So it's a moot point for them. And it doesn't do anything to grow the state that you and I love. I mean, have
Yeah,
you
and
seen
I
Alabama?
think
It's beautiful.
yeah, right. It's got a bunch of natural beauty that more people would come visit if it weren't so scary for them to come to.
Or
Like I've
even places that people would live come to live, because from living on the West Coast for the past 6 years, I'm seeing this major trend of people like me who just do not have the finances to compete with West Coast housing market. I live in Portland.
Yeah.
The median home value in Portland, Oregon is like $460,000. And a house will go on the market and be sold in 10 or 15 minutes sometimes. That's not something that my family has the resources to mess with. We would love to move to some place that's a little bit more reasonable cost of living, especially in a beautiful state like Alabama.
Hmm. Yeah, and then the follow up, and it's not just the fact that we have the privilege and like we can, but other people can't. Humans are a we're like a social being. Um, there's an anthropologist, and I don't remember her name. Probably should try to memorize this, but there's an anthropologist who has been credited for essentially saying, you know, broadly speaking, the anthropology uh, uh, industry. What's That's not the right word.
Field?
Anthropologists. We'll go there. Yeah, the field of anthropology generally considers civilization to start when they found the first skeletal healed femur. So the femur bone of the leg, which is one of the toughest bones, typically if that bone is broken, you are no longer a productive member in society. Like you're no longer helpful. You can't run, you can't walk, you can't hunt. Like you can't do productive things to help give back to your society. So at one point, there was a switch between you're not helpful, you get left to to nature, to like, hey, you can't physically give back, but you're still a part of us, and you deserve to live. And that's the mark that anthropologists, generally speaking, I'm sure some disagree, whatever, where civilization starts. So if we're talking about trying to be like a civilized society, we have to find ways of taking care of the people who can't necessarily give back. And like that that's a touchy subject for some people. I really don't care, because that's what we're aiming for as a group of people. We are trying to build a society. We're trying to build a group of people. If you want to be an individual, then good luck, because everywhere you go, broadly speaking, especially in the Western world, like you're going to be a part of a group of people. If you live in our state, if we want to keep it to Alabama, you are using societal resources, roads, whatever. Like if you pick something, it is touched by other. You buy food, somebody else helped grow it, or raise it and then slaughter it. Like whatever it is, unless you somehow uh, find a plot of land that you don't have to engage with the rest of society, which is really hard because most times you have to pay taxes still and other
I've
things.
looked
So
into
you
that.
have to
It's a
engage
lot
with
of
people.
work too.
Yeah, and then the flip side is like I mean, if that's what you want to do, I guess go for it. But like everybody else, we're a part of a big group, so like we can't ignore the fact that some people can't give back the same amount. We can't ignore that stuff. So I don't. But the whole reason I brought that up is like even if we could leave, say I was in a place where I could financially we could we could sell the house because the market's ridiculous, like you mentioned. But if I could and wanted to leave, sure, but it doesn't help the people that are still here who can't. And that's partly my responsibility as another human who lives here. Like I can't I can't leave them here to deal with the people who don't care about them. Like that just
Mhm.
seems like pre healed femur. Like that's people literally don't care and want to see people die. I can't leave them here to be handled in the way that other people would like to handle them. I have to
I'm
be
very
super
much on
careful
the
how I
same
say.
page. You explained it better than I did.
Yeah, and I have to be careful how I say things on TikTok because they flag words. So be
Mhm.
be very careful the words I use. But I think we get the idea. Uh, so that I I know one of the things you asked about before we went live is kind of how we can help the state. Um, exact policy, we're still fleshing that stuff out. The main focus of the campaign so far has been awareness, because I'm an independent. I don't have billions of dollars like some of the other candidates who are running ridiculous ads that pick on our already marginalized groups of people. So awareness has been my biggest focus. Policy, I'm working with Unicorn Party, which I don't know if there's anybody in the chat who's involved. If you are, say hey in the TikTok chat, or Facebook or Twitch, whoever else is watching. I'm not going to try and look that stuff up. But we have come up with an education policy that we're working on as a national policy. So it's meant for federal, that will help guide the states essentially. So we have that available. It's on unitedandfierce.com if anybody wants to go check that out. There's a bunch of other policy proposals as well, but the education one is one of the pieces that I want to focus on, including healthcare and prison. Prison reform is probably the word we're going to use right now. The whole system is broken and corrupt, but I don't, reform is probably the first step.
Yeah.
I don't know how far we can take it, but the policy's there. So that's something we've worked together on. Healthcare is coming. There's so much more involved in healthcare than there is in education. So we're still working on that. The big thing we're working on right now is actually mental health, because that's something that affects everybody across the entire nation. And we're trying to do a deep dive, talking to a bunch of people who are afflicted with, or been affected rather, by the lack of healthcare, especially for mental health. But
well, I can also tell you just from work and research that I've done living here in Portland, dealing with mental health problems in the community is a great way to reduce homelessness. Those are complementary issues.
Yeah,
which is something you see very
there's
clearly on the West Coast.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, if you interact with most people who are currently houseless, like they are afflicted with something. Like there aren't many people who are houseless who just, and by that I mean like literally tent on the side of the street. Like there are people who are living out of their cars that are temporarily houseless, and that's a different situation. It's all houseless and it's all horrible. But the people who are long term living on the side of the street, a lot of the ones that I've interacted with here in the Mobile area behave erratically. I'll say that, and it could be anything, but whatever it is, mental health is most likely involved. Drugs might be involved. Alcohol is probably involved. And for me, the frustrating part when people start talking about those who are houseless, and they talk about, they're just on drugs, or they're just, they're drunk all the time or whatever. My pushback for most people is always like, hey, do you never go home and do something to relax? Like when you get done with a long day of work, like, do you not come home and do something to relax? Like, I don't care if it's video games. I don't care if it's alcohol. It could be marijuana. It could be, whatever. Pick your way to relax. But most of us do something to get our mind off of the day we just had. Now imagine not having a house to go to, and your options are few and far between. So like, do they do alcohol, or do they do alcohol? Do they do drugs? Do they drink alcohol? Probably. And like, am I going to blame them for that? No. Like, why would you blame them for trying to get a little bit of reprieve from their unimaginable situation? For me, like, it's imaginable for some because they've been through it, but like, I can't blame them for the way that they handle their current situation. What I would rather do, like you were mentioning, is find some way to help them out of that. So mental health care, drug rehab. If you go to unitedandfierce.com and you follow one of the other candidates who's running for president in 2024, shameless plug for Jasmine, they are running on a radical profile, or platform rather, that the federal platform has a bigger ability to do some of the things that they want to do. So I'm focusing on stuff that I know that we could do as a state. We don't have a ton of funding in our state. Our state literally is a welfare state. We take money from the federal government that comes from other states. So we're reliant on other people. Finding ways to make money though, as a state. We mentioned marijuana a second ago, or I did. That'd be a nice way to start bringing in some revenue if we made that
Boy,
legal.
does it work for Oregon.
Yeah.
Our schools. Another thing Oregon did recently is tax nicotine products at a incredibly high. I think it's a 25% tax,
Yeah.
luxury tax. Um, that can I'm not the biggest fan of that ethically because I feel like people who smoke are more likely minimum wage workers, similar types of people, and that's kind of their that's not a healthy or good thing to do, but that's kind of like you were speaking about houseless people who use substances. Like it's that if that's the one thing that helps them feel okay. I don't know how I feel ethically about a huge tax on it, but that is a creative solution.
Yeah.
And that I think it's an example of out of the box thinking that's interesting.
Yep. Alice is here on Facebook. Alice, I can't reply to you, so I'm just going to show it. But Alice is mentioning that homeless folks can't sleep without some kind of drug or CNS repression. It's rough sleeping outside. And it's not a character flaw; it's survival or addiction, or both. Like,
Mhm,
I mean, it may have started as survival and turned into addiction, or vice versa. It doesn't really matter to me. The solution is to get them out of the situation that requires that in the first place, not punishing them for where they're at now, which that gets into the
mhm.
whole prison system, which we have 3 minutes at the least. I don't know if you can stick around longer. If you
You're
can,
right. I got a few more minutes.
okay. We have a baby that's going to be our timer at this point. So um, the prison system, like we God, made a video. It was, I want to say it was poorly timed. It ended up not being poorly timed. So I released a video on TikTok about the 150 plus people who are currently sitting on death row, and not saying I don't want to be a part of that situation. And uh, I can't understand, I can't relate to some of the comments that I got, which were a lot further out than I expected. Some people basically said, "Yeah, we're wasting tax money. Kill them now." And like that was a
Ooh,
like,
that's a
wow, that
take.
is. I don't think you watched the whole video. Like, I don't think you did, because no, that is not what I was. That is not what I was saying. But then my whole point is, though, the system is not designed to try and help the people who are affected by the crime. There's no justice in that regard. There's no real attempt to try and rehabilitate the people who committed the crime. And then three, it's all profit based, and that's why those other two don't happen. Like, the whole point is to
Mhm.
keep people in the prison system. It's not intended to help. The term I found on, oh man, I can't remember the name of the website, but they kept using the term reduce societal harm, and I am learning to love that phrase, because what most people think the prison system is for is to reduce harm to society, but that's not what it's doing. Even acutely, like the punishment aspect isn't helping, but
Mhm.
long term, like let's say it's a crime of burglary, right? So a person doesn't have a lot of money, they rob a house or a store, whatever. It doesn't it In this case, it doesn't matter, but they've now burglarized a facility or a property to most likely sell off, have some cash, and pay for food or whatever else. Again, doesn't matter. They don't have enough money. What that ends up doing is putting them in the prison system, where they literally no longer earn money, and then
Mhm.
they tack on fees while they're in prison, so that when they release, they are in more debt than they were
Mhm.
before they went in. And it's just a vicious cycle that goes back and forth. And like that adds to more harm, because the families that they're tied to are now obligated to help pay for those debts, or they're committing more crimes to try and pay for the debt that they just got in for having done the first crime. And like, there, it's just,
Well,
it doesn't
that
work the way
person, if they
we
went
all
to
tell
jail
it.
on well, if they went to prison on a felony conviction, there's also a good chance that they are no longer going to be allowed to vote, which
Yeah,
is an issue
yeah,
for
that's a
me.
whole nother. I'll say it. Whatever. I don't care, because I'm not. Nobody can tell me to stop saying these things. Like, I think people in prison should still be able to vote. Like, they're still a human being who is in our state being affected by our laws. They should be able to vote. Like, I don't care. Like, that is ridiculous. And I think I just got another really long comment from Alice, so I'll put it up. We've got a few minutes. Restitution is in thousands of dollars. You can't get a housing voucher or many other vouchers. Not enough homes, or your voucher is contingent on meds you can't take or afford, or your housing is contingent on you losing your kids or pets. Yeah, and that, I'm reading it for TikTok because not
Mhm.
everybody can see the comment that I'm pulling up. But yeah, it's it literally just builds on itself and makes it harder and harder to get out of the system, and that's one of the reasons I have no problem calling it modern day slavery. Like in Alabama, it's a weird tidbit. And before your kid cries, uh,
We're still good. She usually gives
we're
me
still
a
good.
little bit longer. We're just on alert
Okay.
at this point.
Okay. Gotcha. So when I first started looking into running, my platform was gonna be ending slavery in Alabama. Like that literally instead of like back the beard or something else, it was gonna
That
be
would have
just
gotten some
straightforward.
attention.
It would have. The reason I didn't is our Constitution, the 1901 Constitution of Alabama, technically on paper abolished slavery already. Like it actually is. Um, it has done more to abolish slavery technically on paper than the U.S. Constitution. Like the 13th Amendment, the second half of it says, you can still punish people for crime with slavery. Alabama said no outright. We're not doing slavery anymore. The problem is we're still putting people into prisons where they work against their will for potentially a lifetime, depending on how bad the reciprocal nature, the recidivism is, for either free or if they were working for the state, 25 cents to 75 cents an hour. Like that's literally what we pay incarcerated individuals per hour to do actual like work. And I don't mean like sweeping floors and like building furniture, doing all kinds of stuff. And it's a um, much longer discussion. So I don't know that we need to get into that specifically, but like it's still slavery. I don't care what you call it. You can call it incarceration, but like it's still slavery. Like that's what it is. So
Yeah, and
that's
I'm not so far left myself that I don't feel that some crimes absolutely deserve imprisonment. I
oh
think
okay. So
there are behaviors that a person can exhibit where it is safer for society as a whole for them to not be able to harm other people.
sure.
I don't see that for possession of small amounts of substances. I
Yeah.
don't see prison as being helpful
Well,
for
yeah.
somebody
So
who just had a substance that they were gonna use and got caught before they used it. I
yeah.
don't
So my
doesn't help them, it doesn't help the world around them, it doesn't help anybody.
yeah. So what I wouldn't say that there aren't reasons to take people out of society. My problem is what we do with them once they're out of society. Like we don't have a system in place to try and help them or the people that have been harmed. We're just putting them in a box so that we can use them for labor. And that doesn't solve the actual problem. If anything, it just exacerbates the whole problem. It doesn't make it better. And that's why we have more people in prison every year. Generally speaking, we're actually trending down in the last 6 years. But uh, as a state and as a nation, compared to the rest of the world, our incarceration rates are ridiculous. Like
I read the most
we're
interesting thing the other day. I found an article from Canada that was talking about how 50%, so, about 5% of the population of Canada is Indigenous First Nations
mhm,
Canadians, and about half of their prison population is First Nations people. And clearly that is a problem that needs fixing.
yeah,
But I looked up the number, and the number of people housed in women's prisons in Canada a couple days ago when I looked up this article was like 596 people.
okay,
Women's prisons in the United States house about 7,500 people.
hmm,
And just looking at that difference
yeah. Not to make
blew my mind.
yeah, not. I would be curious what the. I hate using that word now. I've watched too many marginalized folks get severely frustrated at white people saying, "I'm just curious." So, but I would be interested to see the per capita rates because I don't. Yeah, I know we have a lot more people, but
Mhm.
broadly speaking, we have about 25% of the world's prison population in the United States, and we make up like 4% of the
Yeah,
world's
we're sure not 25% of the world.
yeah. We're about 4. If the last time I looked, obviously that number's fluctuating as babies are born, uh, but yeah, 4% of the population, generally speaking, and 25% of the world's prison population, something's amiss. And the fact that it's not getting smaller, and we have states like ours who want to, spend 600 million dollars on new prisons rather than finding ways to, like, I don't know, keep people from being in a situation that makes them commit crimes that put them in prison. I'm trying to figure out how to say that as broadly as possible, because there's a lot of situations. But
There is a term that I came up against when I did in a college class that was relative to this, and I cannot remember it. It might be the key indicators of crime or something indicators of crime.
yeah,
Don't know if that'll ring a bell.
it doesn't. No, but I'm you're
If
gonna
I
hear me
if
clicking
I
quiet
find it, I'll
as
just
I
send
can.
you a message and you can use it in a later video.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
did
yeah,
wanna pull this back though to the moving home to Alabama thing.
yeah.
Because we've been talking about all of these ideas, and it seems like you and I, just as human beings, are pretty close to being on the same page. And that's fun. I enjoy talking to people. Now, I enjoy talking to people I don't agree with because I'm weird. But it's fun to talk to somebody that you really agree with and really seem to be on the same page as. But for me to move home, I don't need to be surrounded by hundreds of people who think exactly like me on every issue.
Right,
What I really would need to be back there is to live in a state where a unfortunate pregnancy outcome doesn't put me in legal jeopardy, and in a state where, if any of my kid or any future kids that I might have said, "Hey, I think I might be trans," where taking them to a therapist who could work through those feelings and helping them make appropriate non-permanent healthcare decisions before the age of 18, where that is not going to get CPS called on me. And I'm really looking forward to, as you continue to build out your platform, looking forward to what you have to say about how you can make those basic safety requirements met for people like me who would love to come home.
yeah. Um, the unfortunate answer is it will take everyone else who's watching this live stream from Alabama to help with that, because the position of governor has some power, but it is not authoritarian, nor would I want it to be. But just so we're on the same page, not necessarily you, but some people have asked, like, all right, cool, like, how are you going to fix this? And I'm like, well, I mean, part of it's hiring people in the right places and influencing our government in the right direction. But I have to work with whoever you give me. Like, I still have to work with the legislature. Like, I still have to push them in the right direction. And if I don't have enough support, they can just overrule me. They can veto whatever I like. Whatever I can veto what they say, but then they can overrule it. Like, it there's only so much I can do. There are some interesting ways we might be able to use something like a state of emergency. Uh, those aren't long term solutions, but there are some interesting ways I'm considering using the powers that the government has, uh, to immediately help people, but also, like, force the state to respect the wishes of the actual residents of our state, because that's what it doesn't seem to be doing right now. There seems to be a smaller group of very vocal people who have enough money to get people elected, which this isn't new to anybody that's speaking, but there are people who still push back on that. They're like, well, we voted those people in power, like, that's who represents us. And I'm like, well, that's who got elected. I will agree with you there. I don't see anything that says the majority of the people in this state agree with that. I can't remember who showed me the numbers. God, I don't have it pulled up, but there was somebody showed me um, the number of people who voted for. God, I want to say it was Biden versus Trump in the last election. Like, there were more people in Alabama who voted for Biden than who voted for Biden in some other states. Like, it was just like there were more people in our state that did. It's just the way it was
Mhm.
strict and the way the electoral college works, like all of that. But, like, if you just do numbers to numbers, there were more people in our state than let's pick. Um, I don't know, let's say Connecticut. I don't know the name, so don't quote me on it. But it was some other state that like should have just been like an all out like, oh yeah, no, like that was an obvious Democratic win. Uh, but our state still individually, not obviously when as a state we didn't vote for him, but
Not corporately.
yeah, not as a collective, or not as a collective because of the way the policies work, right? But it was an interesting stat to see those numbers pointed out side by side to say like, hey, Alabama, like it's not, yeah, don't feel alone. There are, it might have been Birmingham Blue Dot. I don't know if anybody, I doubt she's alive. Anyway, if anybody knows that creator on TikTok, I think it was their account. It was either Birmingham Blue Dot or it may have been uh, deconstructing. Oh man, I can't remember your name. I don't know if you're in the live. Deconstructing something. I can't remember their TikTok username. So
So I
anyway,
actually just
uh,
got in this fight um, with a Yankee the other day, and it turned into a bit of a kerfluffle because my friend was trying to tell me that, oh, all Southern people are homophobic and all Southern people are this, that, and the other. And I was telling, I do so much. Y'all who are from Alabama, I'm fighting for you so hard in Portland, Oregon. You have no idea. You have no idea how hard I'm fighting for you. But I was trying
appreciate
so
it.
hard to convince my friend. Now, I don't know what percentage, so I'm 29 years old. I don't know what percentage of 29-year-olds who are current residents of Alabama would identify with what political party or what they would say on paper their political views are. But I am 100% convinced that nowhere near half of the 29-year-olds in Alabama have any issue with same gender marriage, for example, kind of these more basic social issues. I I am 100% convinced that people my age in Alabama are generally, fine with same gender marriage and people living their authentic lives as who they are, and people getting appropriate health care
Yeah,
and people getting appropriate education about the history of our country. And I am 100% convinced of that. And it would really take something to make me think that the people my age in Alabama as a whole aren't way more progressive than these Yankees think y'all are.
yeah. And I need more people need to understand that. Like, and that's why
I have
I don't
like
know.
three
It may have been
Southern
before I
friends up
decided
here, and we
to
are all
run.
trying so hard.
I ran into somebody on I think it was on my account before I decided to run, but I made a video. So I don't remember. It's been 6 months now, but they are from like the North Bay area in California, and we were chatting, and they were like, "Wait, you're from where?" I was like, "Hi, I'm down in South Alabama," and they're like, "This does not sound like." What I would have expected coming from a bearded dude from Alabama, and I was like, yeah, no, we're not all bigots, like just the loud ones are, and that's kind of why I'm being loud about not being a bigot, because like we're not all, we aren't, the majority of us aren't, like there's just the loud people that tend to, this, what is it, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, right?
Mhm.
So we're trying to push back against that, and let people know that there are people in the state who care about all those marginalized communities in the state.
Mhm.
So that's, and it's tough because I don't want to leave anybody out, but it's disability community, LGBT community, Black people, uh, Indigenous folks that are still here, any other people of color, like all of those marginalized communities. Like it doesn't seem like people are standing up for them, at least on the larger political landscape. Local politics, maybe not from what I see in my area. I'll say that, but
But
on
I
a
really
on a
truly
statewide level, it
believe,
doesn't seem.
but I really, really truly believe, just from the people that I know who are from the state, that there are so many of us who do support those communities, just not being loud enough about it.
Yeah. Actually, and somebody makes a stew in TikTok. I happen to look over and see your comment, so yes, I'm going to mention it because it's super important. Um, I think they have an event coming up. If you give me the date in TikTok, let me know. There's a Yellowhammer Fund is a
Mm,
healthcare fund to help people get healthcare, including
mhm.
abortions, and I believe they're also covering um, uh, transgender care. I'm 90-ish% on that, but I know abortion is because they specifically mentioned it. Stu did. There's a fundraiser coming up in Alice. If you're watching, if you know where that event is, it's either Birmingham or Huntsville. I can't remember. I think it's Huntsville. There's an event coming up where their Yellowhammer Fund is um, doing the event as a fundraiser. So look up Yellowhammer Fund. If you can donate to them, please do. If you can donate on top of that, please donate to my campaign. But do the abortion fund first. Like that's fine. Like whatever. Like
I
that's why
actually
I'm here is to
I
help people
mentioned them
who
in the
are.
little kerfluffle that I was having with my Yankee friend the other day. They said, "Oh, well, there's no funds
Yeah.
that are helping people get that kind of healthcare in Alabama." And I said, "Yes, there are. There's the Yellowhammer Fund."
Yeah, they exist. They need a louder voice. So I'm happy to shout them out here. We're not affiliated in any way. Yellowhammer Fund. If you happen to see this and you want to be affiliated, let's talk. I don't know if you can, but let's chat if it's possible. Um, what was I gonna say? I know it is 6:47, so I want to be respectful of your time and give you a slight break before your kid wakes up.
Let's do
Yeah,
that.
thank you.
I've
Yeah,
Yeah, I've
go
really
ahead.
enjoyed talking to you. This has been enlightening, and I think the part of my story that I wanted you to hear is that I want to come home. I
Yeah,
want to come home. I do not need a perfect state to move home to. I do not need a state where every single person around me agrees with every single point that I want to make. I need a place that's safe for me and my little family and someplace that we can keep building. And
yeah.
I would love to see that happen more than anything in the world.
Well, I'm pushing as hard as I can for it. The thing I will say is I need everybody else in Alabama to help because I keep whatever. I keep running to people who um, their response is everything sounds great, but you're never going to win. And I'm like, well, like then help. Like if you like what I'm saying and you don't like the other options, then you have to help. Like it literally could just be sharing posts. It could be donating. It could be like literally volunteering. If you have spare time, that's fine. But every bit helps because I don't have $6 billion like Kay Ivy does. Like I don't know if that's the actual number, but I'm assuming it's roughly there because of the 1.5 million she had or what? Sorry, I said billions. I way over exaggerated. She has a lot of money, and
It's hyperbole and it's an
yeah,
allowable literary
yeah.
device.
Well, I try not to because I like whatever people take it way out of context.
Campaign ads down there are just
Oh, they're
something.
bad.
I
Yeah,
was
they're
I
they're bad.
happened to be in Alabama about a month and a half before the 2020 presidential election,
Hmm.
and that was something.
Yeah,
That was
they
something.
Well, I don't. Have you seen the ones this year? Like, have you been?
No, I no,
Um,
I was in Alabama in March,
no,
but I wasn't watching any TV, so I
yeah.
haven't seen anything this year.
No, only. I mean, if you have the fortitude. You can look them up, but like I don't really recommend anyone who is being affected by the current change in our state from watching those. Like I can't tell people to. Um, I I just they're bad. Like I don't know. I can't. I don't know what else to say. And it's not just the governor race; it's Senate race. Like all of it. If the ads that are typically running are abhorrent is the words I keep coming out of my mouth whenever I see those ads is like it's just I it's physical disgust is a
Well,
good
I know I'm gonna go
yeah
when we get off this call
yep.
and text all of my Alabama people to put their signature on the petition to get your name on the
Yes
ballot
please it's in the link in my
that's
bio
a start.
so
Because that's something that I can do right now. That is a start.
yep and those are due very very soon and being incredibly candid on a live stream unless a miracle happens that is not going to go my way. I'll phrase it that way. The state already doesn't like the way I'm doing it, and they already say they're going to invalidate, a significant number. So It's unlikely the petition will happen, but that just means my name won't be printed on the ballot. So if not,
Mhm.
we can still do a write-in campaign, and I think there is enough turmoil that if we get in front of the right people, and again, part of this is everybody watching, not necessarily you, Sadie, because you're out of state. Except you can mention it to your friends, but we literally have to tell everybody. Like if you don't like what your options are, that's kind of the point of this democratic election process. Like we literally could write somebody in and they can win. Like it's doable.
Mhm.
We just have to make sure everybody does it. Like that's how this works. So that's if you don't see my name on the ballot, put it on. But I'll let you get with your kid. Enjoy the rest of your night, and I look forward to hearing from you again.
Well, thank you for taking the time of having this conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Yep. Have a good night.
You
Appreciate
too.
it.